Princess Zerevel stood by the large window in her royal chambers, looking at the 3 moons of Syria. Her blue skin shimmered in the soft light. Today was the worst day of her 120 years of life. The royal doctors had just told her the news that broke her heart. She could not have children with any noble Syrian male. "Your Highness," the head doctor had said with his eyes down, "your genetic structure is not compatible with any suitable males in our empire. You cannot continue the royal bloodline." Those words still rang in her pointed ears. For her kind, 120 years was still young. She had many centuries ahead of her, but without the ability to have children, her future as the next ruler was now in danger. A soft knock came at her door. "Enter," she said, not turning from the window. Her mother, Empress Theliavel, glided into the room. The Empress was tall, nearly 7 feet, with the same blue skin as Zerevel, but with silver markings that showed her age and wisdom. "The High Council is demanding answers," the Empress said. Her voice was kind but firm. "They want to name your sister Miravel as the new heir." Zerevel turned, her violet eyes showing both anger and pain. "I have trained my whole life to rule. My mind is sharper than Mara's. My understanding of our laws and customs is better. I would be a good ruler." "I know, my daughter." The Empress touched her shoulder gently. "But our people believe the ruler must continue the bloodline. It is our oldest law." Zerevel looked down. "Then I am finished." The Empress was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I will give you 1 cycle. 1 full revolution of our world around our sun. Find a solution, or I must name your sister as heir." After her mother left, Zerevel paced her room. A full cycle gave her about 1 Earth year. Not much time to solve a problem the best doctors said was impossible. 3 days later, Zerevel sneaked out of the palace. She wore plain clothes to hide who she was. She went to the science district of the capital city, to a small lab hidden between bigger buildings. "Dr. Leary," she called as she entered the dusty lab. "Are you here?" A small Syrian with spotted blue skin popped up from behind a desk covered with strange equipment. Dr. Leary was known for unusual ideas that most other scientists laughed at. "Princess," Dr. Leary gasped, then quickly bowed. "What brings you to my humble lab?" "I need help with a problem the royal doctors cannot solve," Zerevel said. She explained her situation while Dr. Leary listened with wide eyes. "Mom," the doctor said when Zerevel finished. She pulled up some screens showing DNA patterns. "The royal doctors are not wrong. Your DNA has a rare variation. No Syrian noble male would be compatible." Zerevel's shoulders dropped. "So it is hopeless." "I did not say that," Dr. Leary said with a strange smile. "I said no Syrian male would be compatible." The princess looked confused. "What do you mean?" Dr. Leary pulled up new screens showing different DNA patterns. "There is a species from the outer reaches of known space. They recently joined the Galactic Commonwealth. Their genetic structure is quite flexible and adaptable. My research suggests they might be compatible with your unique DNA." "Which species?" Zerevel asked, a small hope growing inside her. Dr. Leary smiled wider. "They call themselves humans, from a planet called Earth." Zerevel stared at the image of a pink-skinned being on the screen. "You think I could have a child with one of these humans?" "It's possible. The genetic science supports it," Dr. Leary said. "Of course, it has never been done before." Zerevel thought of her royal duty, her lifelong training, and the throne that would be taken from her. Then she thought of her mother's deadline, 1 cycle to find a solution. "Find me a compatible human," she ordered. "This stays between us until I say otherwise." Dr. Leary nodded eagerly. "I'll start the search right away, Your Highness." As Zerevel left the lab, her mind raced with both hope and worry. She was about to do something no Syrian royal had ever done before. The future of her rule, and possibly the entire empire, would depend on a species most of her people thought of as primitive and unimportant. But if it worked, everything would change. Dan Miller looked out the window of the transport ship as it approached the Syrian science station orbiting Lumen IV. The massive ring-shaped structure glowed with blue-green lights against the darkness of space. Dan could hardly believe he was here. First human ever assigned to the Syrian core systems, he said to himself, adjusting his uniform. At 32, Dan had worked hard to become one of Earth's top xenobiologists. When the Galactic Commonwealth Exchange Program selected him, he had celebrated for days. Earth had only joined the Commonwealth 3 years ago. Humans were still seen as newcomers, barely worth notice by the older species. The Syrian Empire, which ruled most of the known galaxy, had paid little attention to Earth until now. Docking in 5 minutes, announced the ship's computer. All exchange personnel prepare for arrival inspection. Dan gathered his bags. He had packed light, some clothes, personal items, and his research equipment. The Syrians had told him everything else would be provided. After docking, Dan followed the other scientists, all non-human, through a long corridor. The air smelled different here, sweeter than Earth air. A tall, official-looking Syrian waited at the end. "Welcome to Lumen IV Science Station," said the blue-skinned alien. "I am Director Ven. You will all be assigned to your research sections now." One by one, the scientists were called forward and given their assignments. When Dan's turn came, Director Ven looked at him with strange interest. "Daniel Miller of Earth, Cynobiology Specialist," Ven read from a screen. "You are assigned to Special Research Division, Section 12. Unusual. This is highly classified work." Dan tried to hide his surprise. "May I ask what I'll be researching?" "Dr. Leary will explain everything," Ven said, handing him an access card. "Report there immediately." Section 12 was far from the main research areas. Dan had to take 3 different elevators to reach it. When he finally arrived, he found a lab much nicer than he expected. The equipment was advanced, much better than anything on Earth. "Hello, Dr. Leary," Dan called out. A small Syrian female popped up from behind a workstation. She had spotted blue skin instead of the solid blue of other Syrians Dan had seen. "Ah, the human has arrived," Dr. Leary said, rushing over to inspect him. She walked around Dan, looking him up and down. "Excellent specimen. Good height, clear eyes, strong build." Dan felt uncomfortable. "Excuse me, but what exactly am I here to do?" "To study cross-species genetic compatibility. Of course," Dr. Leary said as if it were obvious. "Your genetic profile is very interesting to us." Before Dan could ask more questions, the lab door opened. Dan turned and froze in surprise. A tall, elegant Syrian female entered. Unlike Dr. Leary, she wore elaborate clothes with shining gems. The small crown on her head made it clear who she was. "Your Highness," Dr. Leary said, bowing low. "May I present Daniel Miller of Earth." The princess, it could only be a princess with that crown, looked at Dan with intense violet eyes. "So this is the human whose genetic structure might be compatible with mine." Dan bowed awkwardly, not sure of the proper protocol. "It's an honor to meet you, Your Highness, though I'm afraid I don't understand what's happening. I am Princess Zerevel, heir to the Syrian Empire," she said. "And you, Daniel Miller, may be the answer to my problem." Over the next few weeks, Dan worked in the lab while Princess Zerevel often came to watch. Dr. Leary ran countless tests on samples from both of them, always excited by the results. Dan tried to focus on the scientific opportunity, but he couldn't help feeling like he was being studied for more than just research. The way the princess watched him made him nervous and curious at the same time. One day, Dr. Leary rushed into the lab, looking more excited than ever. "I've confirmed it," she announced. "The compatibility is even better than I hoped. There is an 89% chance of successful genetic combination." Princess Zerevel's face showed both relief and worry. "Then it is time to tell him the truth about why he is here." Dan looked between them. "Tell me what." The princess took a deep breath. Daniel Miller of Earth, I need to speak with you privately. What I am about to ask you will change both our lives forever. Princess Zaraval led Dan to a private meeting room near the lab. The room had a large window looking out at the planet Lumen Ivy below. Once inside, she pressed a button that turned the walls opaque. No one can hear us now, she said, her voice softer than the commanding tone she usually used. Dan stood awkwardly, not sure if he should sit. Your Highness, what's this about? Why am I really here? Zaraval gestured to a chair. Please sit. This will take some explaining. As Dan sat, he noticed how the princess seemed nervous, something he hadn't seen in her before. Her blue skin seemed paler, and her tall, regal posture was slightly bent with worry. In our empire, she began, the royal bloodline is everything. The heir to the throne must be able to have children, to continue the family line. Dan nodded. That's true in many Earth cultures too. 3 months ago, I learned something terrible, Zaraval continued. I cannot have children with any Syrian noble male. My genetic structure is different. I'm sorry to hear that, Dan said, beginning to understand. And that's why I'm here. For genetic research. Zaraval's violet eyes met his. You are here because Dr. Leary discovered that humans, specifically you, might be compatible with my genetic structure. She paused. Daniel Miller, I need to have a child to keep my position as heir. And you may be the only being in the galaxy who can help me. Dan felt like the room was spinning. You want me to father your child? Yes, she said simply. Dr. Leary has confirmed the compatibility. A child between us would carry enough of my DNA to be recognized as Royal Syrian, while your human DNA would allow the pregnancy to occur. Dan stood and walked to the window, trying to process what she was asking. This is a lot to take in, Your Highness. I understand, she said. Syrian law forbids royalty from even speaking directly with lesser species as my people call yours. If the High Council knew I was asking this, I could lose my position immediately. So why risk it? Dan asked. Because I was born to lead, Zaraval said with sudden passion. I have trained my entire life. I have ideas that could make the empire better, fairer. My sister who would replace me cares only for power, not for our people. Dan turned to look at her. The mighty princess of the galaxy's largest empire was asking him, a human scientist from a planet most Syrians couldn't even name, for help. What exactly would this involve? He asked carefully. Dr. Leary has prepared a medical process. We would not need to. She paused, seeming embarrassed. The procedure would be clinical. And the child? Dan asked. Would I have any rights as a father? Zaraval looked surprised by the question. I had not considered that. In our culture, royal children belong to the empire. That's not how it works for humans, Dan said firmly. If I agree to this, I would want some role in the child's life, and guarantees of safety for both me and the child. The princess thought for a moment. Those are fair conditions. We would need to work out the details carefully. Dan sat back down, his mind racing with the scientific, personal, and political implications. This child would be heir to the Syrian Empire. Half human. Yes, Zaraval said. The first of its kind. A new beginning, perhaps, for both our peoples. After a long silence, Dan spoke. I need time to think about this. Of course, Zaraval said. But I must warn you. I have less than 9 months left in the cycle my mother gave me. After that, my sister takes my place. Dan nodded. I'll give you my answer in 3 days. As he left the meeting room, Dan's head was spinning. He had come to study alien biology, not change the future of the galaxy. Yet he couldn't deny feeling a strange connection to the proud princess and her desperate situation. For the next 3 days, Dan barely slept. He weighed the risks, the ethical questions, and his own feelings. When he finally returned to meet the princess, his decision was made. I'll do it, Dan said as he entered the princess's private chamber. "I'll help you have this child." Relief washed over Zareval's face. "Thank you, Daniel Miller. You are saving my future and possibly changing the Empire forever." Over the next few weeks, Dan and Zareval spent hours together as Dr. Leary prepared the medical procedures. At first, their meetings were awkward. They came from worlds so different that even simple conversations revealed huge gaps in understanding. "You mean humans only live about 100 years?" Zareval asked one day, shocked. "We Surians live for over 500 years. And you've never tried ice cream?" Dan asked another time. "That's the first thing we need to create in the food synthesizer." Day by day, as the medical treatments began, they shared more about their cultures. Dan told stories about Earth's oceans and mountains. Zareval explained the weight of royal responsibilities she had carried since childhood. "In my world, we choose our leaders," Dan explained. "They serve for a short time, then regular people vote for someone new." Zareval looked confused. "How can regular people know who would make a good ruler? On Syria, I've studied leadership since I was a child." "Maybe that's why our systems are so different," Dan suggested. "We value freedom of choice above almost everything." Freedom. Zareval repeated the word like it was new to her. "We value duty and tradition." One day, after a particularly difficult medical treatment, Dan found Zareval looking sad. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I was thinking about our child," she said quietly. "Half Syrian, half human. Neither world will fully accept them." Dan hadn't thought about that. On Earth, children of mixed backgrounds often struggle at first, but many find strength in having two cultures. 2 months into the treatments, Dr. Leary burst into the room with exciting news. It worked. The princess is pregnant. Dan and Zareval looked at each other in shock. Despite all the planning, the reality hit them hard. They were going to have a child together, a royal heir unlike any before. The news was supposed to stay secret until the princess could tell her mother, but someone in the medical staff leaked it. Within days, the whole empire knew that Princess Zareval was carrying a half-human child. The reaction was swift and dangerous. The High Council called an emergency meeting. "This is an outrage," shouted Council Leader Vox, his blue face dark with anger. "The royal bloodline cannot be polluted with human DNA. The princess must be removed from succession immediately," said another council member. "And the pregnancy must be terminated." Empress Theliavel sat listening to these demands, her face giving away nothing. When the shouting died down, she spoke. "My daughter found a solution to her problem, as I asked her to do. The doctors confirmed the child carries the royal genetic markers. But it's half-human," Vox yelled. "A lesser species." Back at the science station, Dan was called to an urgent meeting with security officers. "Mr. Miller, your life is in danger," the head officer said. "There have been 3 separate assassination plots discovered in the past day. Some Syrians see you as a threat to the Empire." That night, 2 armed men broke into Dan's quarters. Only the quick action of the security team saved his life. When Zareval heard about the attack, she made a decision that shocked everyone. She formally declared Dan her royal consort, a position of high honor in Syrian society, and one that came with imperial protection. "This human carries the bloodline of my child," she announced. "He will be respected as royal consort, or those responsible will answer to me." The declaration was unprecedented. No non-Syrian had ever been named a royal consort before. The media exploded with the news, and across the empire, people began taking sides. Earth's government, previously ignored by the Syrians, suddenly received a formal message from the Empress herself, requesting diplomatic talks regarding our now connected futures. As Dan moved into the royal quarters for his safety, he looked at Zareval. "I came here to study alien biology," he said with a weak smile. "I didn't expect to cause a galactic incident." Zareval placed her hand on her stomach, where their child was growing. This is only the beginning. The Syrian Empire had never faced a crisis like this before. The royal princess was carrying a half-human child, and the empire was splitting apart over it. Three main groups formed quickly. The traditionalists, led by council leader Vox, demanded the princess give up her claim to the throne. The progressives, mostly younger Syrians and those from outer colonies, supported Zerubbabel's bold choice. The third group, the opportunists, saw a chance to gain power for themselves during the confusion. "This division weakens us," Empress Theliavel said during an emergency meeting with her advisors. "Already our enemies are watching." She was right. The neighboring Dravian collective, long jealous of Syrian power, began moving ships closer to disputed border systems. Other galactic powers started making secret deals with different Syrian factions. Meanwhile, Earth suddenly found itself important. The small planet that most aliens had ignored was now connected to the royal family of the galaxy's largest empire. "We need to send our best diplomats to Syria," said Earth's president. "This could be our chance to gain real standing in the Commonwealth." At the royal palace, Dan tried to adjust to his new role as royal consort. Servants bowed to him now, but he could see the disgust in many of their eyes. "They hate me," he told Zerubbabel one night. "They fear change," she answered, placing his hand on her growing stomach. "But change is coming whether they like it or not." As Zerubbabel's pregnancy continued, Dr. Leary made an exciting discovery. The developing baby showed unusual brain patterns. The combination of human adaptability and Syrian mental abilities is creating something new, she explained, showing them the scans. "This child may have abilities beyond what either species can do alone." When this news leaked, it only made the situation more tense. Some feared the child might be too powerful. Others saw it as proof that mixing species could make the empire stronger. One evening, as Dan and Zerubbabel ate dinner in their quarters, a loud explosion shook the palace. Security guards rushed in. "Your Highness, we must move you immediately," the head guard said. "There's been an attack. Rebels have breached the outer defenses." "Rebels? Who?" Zerubbabel asked as they hurried through a secret passage. "Traditionalists," the guard explained, "led by members of the High Council. They're calling it a purification of the empire." Empress Theliavel met them at a hidden landing pad where a small ship waited. "You must go to the eastern colonies," she told her daughter. "Governor Rila is loyal to me. She will protect you until I can stop this rebellion." "Mother, I should stay and fight," Zerubbabel protested. "Your duty is to protect the Heir," the Empress said firmly, looking at Zerubbabel's stomach. "Go now. That's an order." As their ship fled the capital, Dan and Zerubbabel watched the palace grow smaller. Fires could be seen in parts of the city. "I never thought it would come to this," Zerubbabel said, her voice breaking. "Civil war over our child." Their ship traveled for 3 days before reaching the eastern colony planet of Kilaris. Governor Rila, a tall Syrian female with unusual green markings on her blue skin, welcomed them personally. "Your Highness, you are safe here," she said. "Many of us in the outer colonies have mixed with other species for generations, despite what the capital elite claim about pure bloodlines." For the first time, Dan and Zerubbabel saw how regular Syrians lived. The colony was vibrant, with many species working together. People still stared at them, but with curiosity rather than hatred. "The common people are more divided on your situation than the High Council suggests," Governor Rila told them. "Many support you, especially after hearing about your child's special potential." One evening, as Dan and Zerubbabel walked through a public garden on Kilaris, a small Syrian child approached them. "Are you really having a baby that's half-human?" the child asked Zerubbabel. "Yes, I am," she answered carefully. The child smiled. "Cool. My friend is half-Dravian, and she can see in the dark." As the child ran off, Dan and Zerubbabel looked at each other. Perhaps there was hope after all. Back on the capital planet, Empress Theliavel faced the rebel council members with icy calm. She had already arrested council leader Vox for treason. "This rebellion ends now," she told them. "My daughter will return, and her child will be recognized as royal heir." The fight was far from over, but across the empire, the lines were being drawn, and in the center of it all was an unborn child, half human and half Syrian, whose very existence was changing the course of galactic history. Zeravol's pregnancy progressed quickly in the peaceful colony of Kilaris. By the 7th month, her blue skin stretched tight over her round belly. Dr. Leary, who had joined them in exile, monitored the princess closely. "This is the first human Syrian child ever," she reminded them. "We must be careful." One night, Zeravol woke with sharp pain. "Dan," she gasped, shaking him awake. "Something's wrong." Dr. Leary rushed to their quarters and checked the princess. "The baby is coming early," she announced. "We must prepare for birth now." Governor Rila provided their best medical team. For 18 hours, Zeravol fought through a difficult labor while Dan held her hand. Syrian births were usually easy, but this mixed-species pregnancy was challenging. "Push, Your Highness," Dr. Leary urged as the final moment approached. With a cry of pain and relief, Zeravol delivered her child. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the tiny baby boy. His skin was pale blue, lighter than pure Syrian's, but with a definite blue tint. His eyes, when they opened briefly, were shaped like a human's but with the violet color of his mother. "He's perfect," Dan whispered, tears in his eyes. "The royal heir," Dr. Leary said in awe. She ran quick medical scans. "His vital signs are strong. In fact," she paused, checking her instruments again, "his brain activity is extraordinary, even for a Syrian royal." The news of the birth spread quickly. Governor Rila announced it to the colony, and celebrations began in the streets. Messages of congratulation arrived from progressive leaders across the empire. Zeravol and Dan named their son Elivel, combining human and Syrian naming traditions. From his first days, little Elivel showed remarkable development. He focused his eyes sooner than either human or Syrian babies usually could. His cries seemed to have a strange effect, calming those who heard them. "He's developing faster than any baby I've studied," Dr. Leary reported after 1 month. "And look at this." She showed them a scan of the baby's brain. "These patterns suggest he may have enhanced telepathic abilities, beyond even what our royals develop." As word of the extraordinary child spread, public opinion across the empire began to shift. People were fascinated by stories of the special baby prince. Many who had opposed the mixed-species birth began to reconsider when they heard of his gifts. On the capital planet, Empress Theliaval had regained control after putting down the rebellion. Council leader Vox and his supporters were imprisoned. The Empress announced that she would visit her grandson in the eastern colonies. When the imperial ship landed on Kilaris, crowds gathered to see the Empress. She walked straight to the governor's residence, where Zeravol waited with little Elivel. The Empress took one look at her grandson, and her stern face softened. "May I hold him?" she asked. As Theliaval held the baby, something remarkable happened. The baby reached up and touched her face. The Empress gasped, her eyes widening. "He showed me things," she whispered. "Images, feelings, so clear." She looked at her daughter with new respect. "This child is extraordinary." That evening, in a formal ceremony broadcast across the empire, Empress Theliaval made a historic announcement. "Today I have met my grandson, Prince Elivel, son of Princess Zeravol, and her consort Daniel Miller of Earth. I officially recognize him as a true heir of the royal bloodline and welcome him into the imperial family." The Empress then surprised everyone with her next words. "Furthermore, I announced that genetic compatibility tests will now be conducted throughout the Commonwealth. The imperial family will no longer limit itself to Syrian-only unions if greater strength can be found in diversity." In their private quarters, Dan watched as Zeravol put their son to sleep. "Your mother has changed her views," he said quietly. Zeravol nodded. "Elivel changed them." Even at 2 months old, he has powers we don't fully understand. Dan looked down at his sleeping son, this tiny being who was already reshaping an empire. What will he be like when he grows up? Dan wondered. He will be the bridge between two worlds, Zoraval said, and perhaps many more. 5 years passed quickly. Prince Elival grew into a remarkable child with abilities that amazed everyone. His skin remained light blue, and his violet eyes seemed to see more than others could. He learned to speak both Syrian and English perfectly by age 2. By 4, he could move small objects with his mind, something even adult Syrian royals could rarely do. "Father, watch this," Elival called to Dan one morning. The boy closed his eyes, and 3 toys rose from the floor, dancing in circles. Dan smiled proudly. After 5 years on Syria, he had adjusted to life as royal consort. Some still looked at him with distrust, but many had come to respect the human who had changed their empire. Princess Zoraval had grown too. Once focused only on tradition and duty, she now led the progressive faction in the government. She had introduced reforms that opened the empire to new ideas and greater cooperation with other species. "The Commonwealth representatives are waiting, Your Highness," a servant announced. Zoraval nodded. "Tell them we'll be right there." She turned to Dan. "Are you ready? This trade agreement with Earth is important." Dan straightened his royal robes, still feeling strange in the formal Syrian clothing. "I'm ready. Who would have thought I'd be helping negotiate between our worlds?" The family walked together to the grand meeting hall, little Elival between them, holding both their hands. People bowed as they passed. Many reached out, hoping the young prince might touch them. Across the empire, stories spread about the healing and comfort that came from the child's touch. The Earth representatives rose as the royal family entered. Relations between Syria and Earth had grown strong. Humans were now welcome throughout the empire, and many Syrians visited Earth to study human culture. After the meeting, a messenger approached Zoraval with urgency. "Your Highness, the Empress requests your presence immediately." In the imperial chambers, Empress Theliaval waited. Though still strong, 5 years had added silver markings across her blue skin. "My daughter," she said when they entered, "the time has come. I have decided to step down from the throne." Zoraval gasped. "Mother, are you certain?" The Empress nodded. "I have ruled for 2 centuries. It is time for new leadership. In 1 month, you will become Empress." News of the coming succession ceremony spread across the galaxy. It would be the most watched event in Commonwealth history. For the first time, representatives from Earth would stand in the front row of galactic dignitaries. On the day of the ceremony, the Grand Imperial Palace shone with lights. Visitors from 100 worlds filled the streets of the capital. Inside the palace, Dan helped Elival with his formal clothes. "Today your mother becomes Empress," he told his son. "And someday, many years from now, you will too." Elival looked up with his wise eyes. "I know, Father. I've seen it." The boy's vision abilities had grown stronger. Sometimes he saw possible futures, though he was too young to fully understand them. As the family walked toward the Great Hall, Elival suddenly asked, "Father, will you take me to Earth someday? I want to see the oceans you talk about." "Of course," Dan promised. "You belong to both worlds." The ceremony was magnificent. When Empress Theliaval placed the imperial crown on Zoraval's head, cheers echoed through the palace and across the empire. Dan stood proudly beside his wife, now Empress Zoraval of the Syrian Empire. Their son, the first half-human, half-Syrian prince, watched with bright eyes. "Today marks not just a new ruler, but a new era," the official announcer proclaimed. "The beginning of a new dynasty." That night, after the celebrations, the family stood together on the palace balcony, looking at the stars. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zoraval asked Dan. "When you first came to that science station?" Dan shook his head. "Never. I came to study alien biology, not create a new dynasty." Eleval, sleepy but happy, leaned against his parents. I'm glad you did, Father. I saw other futures where I didn't exist. This one is better. As they looked up at the countless stars, they knew their story was just beginning. The child once thought impossible had changed everything, opening doors between worlds that had always been separate. A new dynasty was born, bridging the gap between humans and Saurians, and perhaps someday, all the species of the galaxy.